Good evening, and welcome to Mindful Life. Mindful Life 297. This is the number might be wrong over on TikTok if you're seeing a wrong number, but it's 297. Take my word for it. My apologies. Thank you for being here. I am your host, Nathan Springer. It is the 24th of the 10th. Yep, nearly ending October already in the year 2023. And what we're talking about today, we have several issues. You know, there are always multiple issues to cover on a given day. But what we're starting talking about today is a issue over on the South American continent. Some bacchanal with borders and our Caribbean neighbor that isn't exactly Caribbean but kinda Caribbean enough, so you know, let's not be too pedantic with the definitions there. But you know, our Caribbean neighbor recently finding oil, and that has only exacerbated some of the problems that they are facing, some of the problems that they were already facing before. Yo, sup Nick Buck report. Alright, let's dive right into that. If you are viewing this over on TikTok, make sure to double tap the screen. That's how you like the video over there. The likes go a long way to helping the algorithm to know, hey, this is good stuff. Send notifications to out to more people, and you don't only have to like once. You don't only have to like once, you could like it over and over and over and over again. It really does help. Guyana might try to cancel me like they did to Major Hype. I mean, I saw some of that Major Hype bacchanal, and Major Hype, I think he knew very well the troubled waters he was wading into when he started that, but the man wasn't exactly wrong. He could have described a little better, but he wasn't exactly wrong. I was genuinely surprised that Suriname also has a dispute with Guyana. You see, if you understand some of that history curve on, and it's similar to go back to the much belabored current event, Nathan Springer over on IG. To go over to the much belabored current event story, it's in a way similar to what's going on in the Middle East right now, where, remember, Guyana, Suriname, Venezuela, they weren't countries that existed there since time began. They were countries cut out by European decisions based in the Caribbean. Hey, Matic Boss, I see you over on Instagram too. Yeah, man, I see it. Yeah, there were decisions made by European heads over there, and the consequences down here sometimes had varying ramifications. Yes, who has the right to land to give? Who exactly, Curvon? Whose land is it to give? And if the British made a deal to give some land, do you have to uphold that deal? Or if the Spanish made a deal to give some land, but then they gave the land to someone else, and someone else went back and reneged on the deal that they made, it's a whole complicated mess. It's a complicated mess, and that complicated mess results in far-reaching ramifications even to this day. So I heard the waters actually belong to Venezuela, and some English just gave Guyana the land. Well, you see, that's the bacchanal right there, Linz. That's the bacchanal right there. The Venezuelans are claiming some gerrymandering that went on in how the lands were divided. Now, it may be worth it to note that Guyana is the only English-speaking country in South America. So, that already tells you that the history of Guyana very likely is one with some complications. If you see something like that, one little patch of English speaking in a whole sea of Spanish and, well, Portuguese, you understand there is history there. Alright, let's dive into the story though. Let's dive into the story coming out from the Newsday. Guyana, Venezuela warn each other. This song's a bit scary. Guyana, Venezuela warn each other. This could get violent. And I mean, none of us want that. But to me, this is just another bit into the whole stewing pot of global instability. Former colonies fighting over whatever the former masters gave them. RL asks, wait, Guyana have a defense force? Well, you see, the reality, RL, is Guyana has money. Guyana has money right now. And I am not hoping for any kind of conflict. I'm not hoping for any kind of anything anywhere. But money does go a long way. Bear in mind, if you go back through history, the war between the Romans and the Carthage, it was based on money. Yes, Ronnie, they have money, they have access to money. They do. And when we get into the article, you'd see exactly what Venezuela is claiming Guyana is using here. Let's get into this. Guyana President Irfan Ali wants Venezuela to know that his country will not tolerate what he described as the latter's unlawful and unfounded claims to more than 2/3 of it. And Krimak asks why Guyana do behave. Well, I mean, if Venezuela is attempting to claim more than 2/3 of Guyana, you could kind of guess why they wouldn't behave with a claim like that hanging over their heads. Ali said Venezuela is trying to undermine Guyana's territorial integrity and warned the move has the potential to incite violence and threaten peace in the Caribbean. In a statement on Monday, Ali said his government had taken careful note of 5 questions issued by Venezuela's National Electoral Council, which are to be asked in the December 3rd national referendum. Among those questions, he said, is one that brazenly seeks the approval of the Venezuelan people of the creation of a new Venezuelan state consisting of Guyana's Essequibo region, which would be incorporated into the territory of Venezuela, and the granting of Venezuelan citizenship to the population. You see, peace in the Caribbean, who going to help them, Krimak asks. You see, there are oil interests in Guyana now. And there's always violence willing to back up oil interests. There's always violence. And don't worry, you're asking who would back them up. You're asking who would back them up. When you hear what the Venezuelan president has to say, you'd understand exactly what the Venezuelan president is worried about. Because the Venezuelan president isn't taking the Guyana president's words as just some nothing words of a toothless dog. This isn't the backwater Guyana of old. This is Guyana who, when they say something, there is some merit, especially when you look around and you see that war seems to be brewing all around the world. And when war is brewing, oil and gas becomes extremely valuable, and Guyana recently hit it big. Some people may be estimating that Guyana may be having some top 5 nearly windfall in terms of the amount of store they have inside the soil. How much they potentially could get out there. It's a lot. Let's go down to the end of this article quickly to get the questions, that is upsetting the Guyana president. Here are the questions. These are questions that the Venezuelan government have put into the ballot for the Venezuelan public to vote for. They are having referendums on these questions inside of Venezuela. The vote happens on December 3rd. Listen to the questions being posed to the Venezuelan public. Question 1. Do you agree to reject by all means, in accordance with the law, the line fraudulently imposed by the Paris Arbitration Award of 1899, which seeks to deprive us of our Guyana Essequibo? That's the first question. Do you agree to reject the arbitration that made this border in the first place? And you know, when people talk about who has the right to share this land and who has the right to give this land and right to do that and right to do that and right to do that and this law and this law and this law and this law and well this committee and this committee, and I was saying this last week and the previous week when we were talking about the conflict in the Middle East, that really and truly it's about who has the ability to take it and defend it. Venezuela could go to their people and say we want to vote to ignore all of the previous agreements that we signed. And they could decide to ignore them. And what you gonna do about it? That's only question one, by the way. That was only question one. Question two, being posed to the Venezuelan public. Now, listen how these questions are even posed. I don't know how many of you do a lot of questionnaires or a lot of reasoning and rhetoric and things like that, and think about writing questions and posing questions and how you frame them in the first place. These questions are framed with a heavy bias from even the outset. Number two, do you support the Geneva Agreement of 1966 as the only valid legal instrument to reach a practical and satisfactory solution for Venezuela and Guyana regarding the controversy over the territory of Guyana Essequibo? So, do you even regard the Geneva Agreement with any merit? Question number three, do you agree with Venezuela's historical position of not recognizing the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice to resolve the territorial controversy of Guyana Essequibo? Yes, they are called leading questions, Pyrodi. So they are posing a question. Good night, Sylvan. One of the questions, the third question is, do you agree that we are not even recognizing the International Court of Justice? Like, what is that? And you know, people talk about these courts and the UN and this one and this one. As I was saying, if somebody doesn't care, what do you do? What do you do? Question number four, do you agree to oppose by all legal means Guyana's claim to unilaterally dispose of a sea pending delimitation illegally and in violation of international law? And number five, the question number five is the really problematic one. Do you agree with the creation of the Guyana Essequibo state and the development of an accelerated plan for the comprehensive care for the current and future population of that territory that includes, among others, the granting of citizenship and a Venezuelan ID card in accordance with the Geneva Agreement and international law, consequently incorporating said state on the map of Venezuelan territory? Now, I ask you this. Good morning, Silverback. What is going to happen come December 3rd? Yes, that's true, Sylvan. What's going to happen come December 3rd if Venezuela does indeed vote to recognize this entire chunk of Guyana as being a state of theirs? And they start to send in their military to, guard their state. They send in law enforcement to enforce Venezuelan laws in their state. They start to issue identification cards as Venezuelan citizens to all the residents of that Essequibo region. What's going to happen then? In a statement in direct response to Ali, the Venezuelan government said Ali's comments were offensive. It said his statement was loaded with profound contempt for the Venezuelan people, its Bolivarian history, and its right to express itself in a democratic manner on matters of special national importance. Guyana's statements once again are being drafted. Listen to this. Listen to what Venezuela is alleging here. Listen to what Venezuela is alleging here. Yes, Adriel Robinson, it's something like that. Something very similar to that. They're alleging that they have a historical claim to the land. Yo, good night, Shy Guy. They're alleging they have a historical claim to the land. And they're going to take it. Which is basically what Russia did. But listen what the Venezuelan government is alleging from Guyana here. Guyana's statements once again, this is the Venezuelan government speaking. Guyana's statements once again are being drafted by the law firm employed by ExxonMobil, a company that has corrupted the Latin American and Caribbean values of this nation and has bought off the Guyanese political class, dragging them into erratic actions contrary to the public international law, with the objectives of appropriating energy resources that do not belong to it and attempting to threaten the peace and stability of Venezuela. Yes, they do, Krimak. Russia didn't do what? Russia didn't do what? Claim that they have a historical claim on a land and attempt to take it. Well, that's an extreme oversimplification on my part. That's not exactly what happened. I agree. The general idea is they do have a historical claim on the land. That's not even a Nancy Story claim. They do have a historic claim, especially on the eastern parts of Ukraine. Russia during the Soviet Union did do a lot to build up that bit. There's a lot of that accurately claimed there, but also in that there's the geopolitical business of Ukraine was supposed to be, I believe the Ukraine means the borderlands, like actually in meaning, and they were supposed to be, as it were, a bit of a buffer territory between the Russian influence and the Western influence, and then the Western influence attempted to have a little coup inside of Ukraine, and then the Western leaders of Ukraine allegedly began persecuting the Russian ethnic groups in Eastern Ukraine, and the Russians basically said that they have to come in to defend them, right? To give it a little longer thing. But the simplistic way as outlined in the good guy bad guy narratives of global news, the Russians had a historical claim on part of Ukraine and they went in to attempt to take it. That's the story, and that may be exactly the narrative that is basically being said from Venezuela's point of view also. Good night, Faisabad. The first world wouldn't allow Venezuela to pull that off. Vote on it, I guess. First world equal United States of America. Exactly. It's exactly. It is argued that Veni has a historical claim to TNT. I don't know where they get that one from. I mean, you could attempt to make any claim you want, but as I said, at the end of the day, it's all in the might makes right, actually, yeah? Actually, it's in the can you make it happen? You're aware the Russian president got a heart attack this morning and he's in ICU? Yes, I am aware of that. Going on with the Venezuelan statement. So the Venezuelans are alleging that Guyana is being a mouthpiece for the global corporations. That's why they're worried, as it were. The Venezuelans aren't worried about Guyana itself. And it's actually a smart move on Venezuela's part. So it's, as it were, Venezuela is telling the Guyanese citizens, we aren't warring with regular Guyanese. We're warring with these billion-dollar multinational corporations that have bought off your elites, and they are making decisions against your own interests. This is the Venezuelan speaking again, Venezuelan government statement. Contrary to this nefarious anti-sovereign practice, the National Assembly of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, in full exercise of its powers, has decided to consult the people of Venezuela, the main lines of legal, diplomatic, and political actions, in order to enforce the legitimate rights over the territory of Guyana Essequibo. It added that Ali's refusal to have diplomatic dialogue threatens a dangerous escalation of a conflict of great dimensions promoted by the U.S. Southern Command. And therein you have why this isn't just an issue of if Guyana has an army. The U.S. Southern Command, which is in charge of military actions in the region. This article is Guyana, Venezuela warn each other this could get violent. It's a Newsday article. US not gonna allow none to ET&T is their natural gas. Baby Scrimac says, yes, it's a smart move. I even thought of it. They are underpopulated with all that mass of land. Would have raided them too. Wide Leather says our PM regularly advocates for Caracas. Rowley is like Venezuela unelected ambassador. I don't know. But that's the allegation, and I don't think either of them are joking about this. The Venezuelan government did indeed put it up towards a vote. They did indeed do that. And it's going to happen on December the 3rd. And generally speaking, inside Venezuela, most ballots go in the direction that the government wants it to go in. So December may be an eventful month in South America. Citizens of Guyana Essequibo may become dual citizens of both Venezuela and Guyana. The opposition in Venezuela is mobilizing. Maduro is trying to galvanize support on an issue. Maybe, it may be, but trying to galvanize support on an issue may have started so many wars in history before. Like there are allegations that Bibi Netanyahu is attempting to galvanize support in Israel, and that's something to do with why the conflict kicked off there. There are allegations that the Ukraine conflict has something to do with Joe Biden's actions. The attempt to galvanize support by creating conflict isn't a new thing. Guyana president sounding like Ukraine president taking chain up, Krimak says. Well, Krimak, I don't doubt that ExxonMobil indeed has some influence. I spoke about this previously, ExxonMobil has history with Venezuela, and there may indeed be bad blood between them, between Exxon and Venezuela, and Exxon may be willing to pour millions of dollars into making sure things don't work well with Venezuela. That may be very well true. But from the Guyanese president point of view, if you are the leader of Guyana, do you want to be the leader of Guyana that loses 2/3 of your country's landmass? Good night. Can you do a story of the activity surrounding the death of Maurice Bishop? I could attempt to do that not as a live, but as a video on my YouTube. That's a good idea, actually. I'll attempt that. I will. But yeah, if you're the leader of Guyana, put yourself in his shoes. What do? Guyana has no capital to extract the oil they have. They need ExxonMobil that's not taking chain up. Exactly. but violence is never the way. Well, what the Guyanese president said, he didn't threaten violence, He said that this could lead to violence, and it could. It is a situation that could lead to violence. If two neighboring countries are both claiming the same territory, and they both send law enforcement to enforce their own laws in that territory, it's going to cause violence. Good night, feelings. Not approach with violence. Violence should not be in his mouth. Well, I don't know. Because to me, I find what he said to be a bit of an honest representation of it. Now, I don't know all the legal letters that may have flown in between them behind the scenes that I am not privy to. But the quote that he has here regarding violence, that doing something like this, and the quote was specifically in regards to the fifth question that was on that Venezuelan questionnaire. And I understand what he's saying. He is not incorrect. The government of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana calls the attention of the international community to the actions being carried out by the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, which have the potential to incite violence and to threaten the peace and security of the state of Guyana and by extension the Caribbean region. That's an accurate statement. Guyana is a patong and Venezuela is a tiger, really? Well, Guyana might be a patong and Venezuela might be a tiger, but Guyana is a patong that is in a pack with the strongest predators in the jungle. Venezuela does not want to attack Guyana. It's not going to work for them. Like, y'all seem not to understand the world we live in, Krimak. I think like you don't understand the world we live in. If this world that we live in were to be carried back 3,000 years, we are all actually part of the empire of the United States. I hope you all understand that. We are part of the US empire for all intents and purposes. And Venezuela would be within the Russian sphere of influence. Now, they wouldn't be able to be part of that Russian empire because they are very far away. So, it's when Venezuela is speaking to Guyana here, and I quoted this coming from the Venezuelan government. The Venezuelan government isn't speaking as if they're speaking to President Ali and the Guyanese Defense Force. They're speaking as if they're speaking to the infinite pockets of ExxonMobil. And in case a lot of you don't know, many wars in modern times are still fought by mercenaries, people paid to fight, having a lot of money, as I was making the example with Rome and Carthage, gives you military power. So when Venezuela is talking about this, they're talking as if they're facing in opposition the infinitely deep pockets of ExxonMobil and the military power of the US Southern Command. I could tell you I feel with reasonable certainty, coming close to December 3rd, when this ballot comes closer and closer to coming forward for Venezuela to vote to basically abscond piece of Guyana's territory, all of a sudden, the US Southern Command would have vessels carrying out training exercises in the Caribbean Sea. Right now, Russia and China is the superpowers. They have nuclear power and military power. Like, Kermack, I don't even believe you all believe this, you know. Like, I have very little patience for the people who are so anti-American that they believe somehow that the people who spend 1% of what the US spends on military budget is actually secretly so much stronger than America, you know. America is just a paper tiger, you know. They aren't actually that strong. You know? Listen, those guys are afraid of the United States. Very afraid of them, deathly afraid of them. Now, the United States may never be able to conquer Russia and take them over, or conquer China and take them over. But what the US can do is eliminate every top official in those countries. I'm not saying you necessarily in a Kermack. I'm talking about a general sentiment I see. Who wants to take the wager with me? Who wants to take the wager with me that come December, all of a sudden, the US Southern Command is going to start to do training exercises in the Caribbean Sea? All of a sudden. All of a sudden, a carrier is going to come and touch down and land and visit Chaguaramas base, and they'll have a joint training exercise, and they'll say it's just, you know, it's just routine training.
The
night room. Thank you, Sylvan. These are things that some people don't understand. The US Navy has the second largest air force in the world. You understand? Because the US Air Force is the largest, and then Navy has the second largest.
But Nathan, a couple things that people don't understand.
Yeah.
The US military, means the Air Force and all those things combined, right, have the most experience fighting wars across all countries, because the number of war the US has been in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In terms of geo-war, Russia and Venezuela has a particular history that America is not going to let develop in their backyard.
Correct.
Right? And people need to understand why America may not engage initially. And Venezuela is also a country that is under heavy sanction. And so I think they are making a play to go to the negotiating table so that the sanction level can be reduced at some point in time, because some sanction has already been lifted from them. Right? So, push on the shove, America and the mercenaries will annihilate Venezuela to the very highest degree. And people don't understand. America has fought 98% of their wars outside of their country.
Listen. Like, some people seem not to understand this. America was going to vaporize Cuba because Russia was allegedly putting some rockets on Cuba. They were willing to vaporize Cuba. The only thing, like, if y'all should go back and read that story. Y'all should go back and read the Cuban Missile Crisis and how close we were to losing the entirety of Cuba. It was just because JFK didn't trust the military-industrial complex and his intelligence services, who may have killed him in the long run anyway. It was because he didn't trust them in the first place that we didn't end up with another nuke dropping. But they were telling him, his people were telling him to blow it. They are not going to allow Venezuela to go and do a conquest in Guyana. I mean, they didn't allow Russia to do a conquest in Ukraine, which is millions of miles away from them. They're not going to allow Venezuela to do the same thing like that. And I saw somebody talk about the global conflicts all around the world. And if you look, and the US loses a lot, it seems. It's not that they lose a lot, but it's just impossible to win by the conditions they want to win. They want to go in and create a whole new, they want to create New York City in Afghanistan. That doesn't happen. There are cultural differences, and people just do not want your culture. You cannot force that. But when it comes to, there's no standing army that can stand with the United States. You don't go toe to toe with the US Army. It doesn't happen. If you have a commander, he is going to be dead within very quick time. Because so I was reading some military history, and they were talking about why Russia has some of the biggest nukes. Russia has the biggest nukes, and people think that translates to meaning. People think that translates to meaning that Russia is the most powerful when it comes to nukes. Who is the US and the ones that cause most wars? Yes, that's true. Yes, they do cause most, well, I don't know for most, but they do cause a lot of wars. But yeah, people think because Russia has the biggest nukes, that means they're the most powerful when it comes to that. And what a military researcher was saying is the United States did not research into making bigger nukes. They researched into pinpoint accuracy. So their technology, the aim of their technology is they can find you and drop something onto the 50-second grain on the top of your head if they want to. While Russia, because they do not have that kind of precise guidance system, they would have to blow up your entire country just to kill you. And that's the idea. So a common story that is given from Mr. Trump, the former president of the United States, and one of the reasons that some of his supporters and some people who aren't even his supporters say that there seemed to have been some resemblance, some semblance of world peace while he was there. China has the strongest military. No, China has the most men. They do not have the strongest military power. It's not the same thing. They have the most men. That's not the same thing as the strongest military power. Anyway, one of the reasons they say that there may have been much more semblance of world peace when Trump was there, it's a story that is out there, is that upon getting into power, he called President Putin and he told him, if you invade, I am going to nuke you. I'm not going to nuke your people. I'm going to drop a nuke on you. And he allegedly called President Xi of China and said the same thing. Now, you see, here's the thing with threats like that coming from the US. They're capable of doing it very likely. They're very likely capable of doing it. So, you have to wonder, okay, I may be able to invade this country, but I will die. Get your data upgraded, Nathan. Kremak, here's what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to do. Google how much the US spends on their military budget. And then Google what is China's GDP. Go Google those things.
Good night, Nathan.
Yo, what's going on, bro?
What's up? Good night, everybody. Good night, team. This topic is very concerning because what happened, I believe, is a bit of geopolitics. They're trying to stretch NATO. Mm-hmm. There's the front, there's the war in Ukraine. It is alleged that Hamas, I believe, would have attacked Israel based on support from Iran and Russia as well. I believe Venezuela is making a play for Guyana, and soon China will try to make moves on
Taiwan.
Taiwan. So I'm they're trying to open multiple fronts and stretch the US forces But it's very concerning when you look at these proxy wars between the world power, whether it was in Asia or in Africa, the bombing, the fighting, and the dying. Mainly, I mean, sometimes US do put boots on the ground, like in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and stuff. But by and large, the destruction and the loss of life, the destruction to infrastructure and the loss of life, it is borne by the host country.
Correct.
So, yeah, everybody's saying, oh, and who go do this, and Russia will let that happen, and America go attack, but the bombs will be dropping in the Caribbean. Well, Major say Guyana is not the Caribbean, but we neighbors and we love them, right? The guys with the bombs will be dropping, and I do foresee the putting boots on the ground. They'll probably wage a proxy war like how they did in Ukraine. We brothers and sisters in Ghana will be dying. We neighbors in Venezuela will be dying. You know what I mean? So I just hope. I mean, it's a very small group, but this small group know other groups and other groups know other groups. That I understand the geopolitics and the staging and the positioning and who just who trying to look bigger than each other. But I just want the conversation to be a little tempered.
You see, Sylvan, I 100% agree. And even in talking about the hypothetical, I agree with you. Let's not get carried away in that. Understand that war is death. Who win and who lose and who conquer and who, at the end of the day, people are dying. And that's the point that many anti-war, I will consider myself to be very anti-war. I am very, very anti-war. I think you shouldn't join those wars. Now, I understand reality is that human history is a history of war.
War necessary, later. Without war, no peace. So violence is a necessary tool.
That's what I was getting to. I am anti-war. My hope is that no war should be fought. My wish, if I have a wish for something, is please let there be no war. But I understand reality, like the conflict in the Middle East. When people talk about that, like people who talk about a ceasefire right now, that's misunderstanding humanity. There's no way Israel would get attacked. Allegedly 1,300 civilians are murdered and slaughtered in different horrible ways, and then they just cease fire. Now it's not going to happen. That's not reality. And like when I hear people talking about, I heard some of the senators in the United States talking about the conflict in Ukraine, and all we have to do is spend money, and we're getting to weaken the Russian military. And when they're talking about weaken the Russian military, they're talking about hundreds and thousands of young men particularly dying. Just throwing men into a meat grinder and sending them out the other side, grinding them to death. And that's what they're talking about while sitting in cushy offices. And I think the understanding of that needs to be had when people talk about war. That is the reality of war. That is what war is. And in most cases, I was pointing this out also about Gaza. When you're talking those geopolitical moves. So, heavens forbid, God forbid, nothing happens in Essequibo. But if something like that were to take place, the citizens of Essequibo very likely would be the people to suffer the most. Two countries fighting over you and you dying right through. So the Gazans, the Gaza citizens, many of them aren't in Hamas. They aren't pro-Israel. They're just caught in the middle there. And some geopolitical move from Iran to try and stop a deal with Saudi Arabia is causing tons of bombs to just drop on your head.
And Nathan, just to put some things in perspective, right? You realize just the other day the Prime Minister had a courtesy call from the command, from the Southern Command.
Yes.
Right. I don't believe that's coincidental. That's the US showing a show of force, and to have further discussion with our security personnel should it become necessary. What protocol and what systems they are going to set up here, because there is no way in the Western Hemisphere, especially under the US nose, they're gonna allow Venezuela to behave in a Russia type of way.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
It is not going to happen. So, and I am saying, while we do understand, we don't want any massive loss of life, but we must understand human nature. And something even back in the Roman days, they say, render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's. The man with the gold make the rules. And we must understand that if Venezuela tries to annex any part of Guyana that interferes with the Geneva Convention, there is going to be boots on the ground. And because let me tell you why, this is right underneath the America's control, and America always want to project force to the world. And if you allow that in your backyard, it's going to interfere with their projection of force. That's their major. That's their one goal of having their military, always projecting America force throughout.
You know, if you watch in Trinidad, and people need to pay attention to this, every year, at least once per year, there's some kind of training exercise with U.S. military and some Navy vessel parked off the coast and something to make sure people understand that we are here. We are here. Don't worry, we are here. Look at where the U.S. places bases. The U.S. has bases in Iraq and Syria. Like, what you doing there? Projecting strength. And Autotech says NATO shouldn't have existed. NATO should have been disbanded. And I mean, if you're talking in terms of what is fair, if like there was a principle of the earth, and we're going to the principal and telling the dean and etc. what should happen, well then the dean would have disbanded NATO and told NATO that you don't need to do what you're doing anymore. There isn't a Soviet Union anymore. You don't have anyone to oppose. But then that's not how the world works. You're saying the US isn't Caesar and we shouldn't allow the US to do something. We don't allow the US to do anything. We cannot stop them. And it's not that they are Caesar, they are Rome. They are the big empire. They are the big fish in the pond. You could not like that. You could not like that. There are many people who don't like that. But there isn't anything you can do about it. In history, that's how slavery happened. You think people wanted to be slaves? No. What happened is somebody who is stronger than you came in and imposed their will upon you, and you couldn't do anything about it.
Nathan, you know what has amazed me is that because we have not been in any major conflict in the Western Hemisphere for a very long while, we really feel that the world is a civil place.
Yep.
And a lot of people is misunderstanding that all of human history has been nothing but savagery and the strongest man projecting his will upon wherever he goes.
Yes, that is the common human history, and the Western world has allowed us to forget that. And I think a lot of people in the Eastern world, they understand that fully, but they pretend sometimes. They pretend.
I want to say one more thing.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The Western, under the Western world, under the umbrella of the United States, we have allowed a certain level of civility. And that's what people forget.
Yeah. Yeah, they're forgetting that, and the idea that you are equal just because you're a human, that's an American liberal enlightenment principle. The idea that you're equal just for being human is not the common thread of human ideology throughout human history. The common thread of human ideology is you're worth as much as the power you could effect onto the earth. If you cannot, so like some women who talk about equal rights, you understand the only reason you have equal rights is because there are men who are willing to enforce it for you. If there are no men willing to enforce it, how do you get equal rights? You must be able to enforce it. That's just the nature of the world. That's just the nature of the world. And Autotech, you say there that the US has no power, they're just able to threaten people with sanctions. How are they able to threaten people with sanctions if they had no power? The reason sanctions work is because they have so much economic power that they could throw their weight around. They are losing power. That's for sure. That's without a doubt they are losing power. And that's kind of why the world is teeter-tottering. So there, I forget what's the name of this. There's a theory. I'll remember it eventually and I'll say it, where they talk about in geopolitics, in politics in general, when you see one global power ascending to take power over the other, nearly inevitably there is going to be a war, because powers don't switch without conflict. So if China wants to ascend to the top, nearly 100% there is going to be war. If Russia wants to ascend to the top, nearly 100% there is going to be war. And you know, I understand many people who don't like the United States think that because they don't like the United States, countries that don't like the United States too might be stronger. I don't actually believe that. I don't believe that China or Russia is actually going to effectively take over the United States in just plain power like that. If the United States loses their position, it's because they would dwindle away. It's not that China has the ability to exceed them like that. I don't think they do. It's not that Russia has the ability to exceed them like that. I don't think they do. I think the United States has the exquisite ability to shoot themselves repeatedly in their own foot. Like,
Nathan,
yeah.
We've been speaking about China and China growth as a superpower. There is Dr. I think Peter Zimmerman is his name. I can't pronounce the last name so good, but he speaks about the population growth of countries, and he was saying because China had a one-child policy for so long, and that everybody wanted the Chinese name that would have lived for thousands of years through different Chinese dynasties to live on, that they practice infanticide.
Yes.
And they would allegedly, I don't know facts, but he is saying, that they would have allegedly killed the girls and keep the boys. But you see, when you look at the population growth was extremely one-sided. So much so that the birth rate is extremely low and there's an aging population.
Yes.
And as far as China becoming a world power or being able to be a superpower in the next, I think he said early as 30 years, they would not have enough persons to project that power. So if anybody is interested, they could probably go on YouTube and just do a little
yes.
a little listen.
I have listened to that before, and there are several problems in China. Their housing markets are crashing. There are cities in China that are ghost towns, where there are cities where all the properties have already been sold and none have been built. They have a lot of problems. They have a lot of problems there. Crimax says America do more harm than good getting involved in matters that don't concern them. I agree with that. I wasn't arguing that America is doing the Lord's work across the world. That was never my argument. Look at the suffering in Iraq, Libya, Syria. Yes, I agree. There has been suffering all over. I don't, as I said, I don't believe China has the ability to on their own just surpass the US like that. Or to Texas, China lends money, the US inputs military bases. Big difference. Now, yes, that is a big difference. If you were looking to actually exert power over the world, military bases are more effective than money. 2, the US also lends money. The US gives money a lot. And by giving money, what they do is they tie you into their monetary system. Yes, RL is US dollars. So the US doesn't need to do a Belt and Road initiative. They have the petrodollar initiative. So that's why BRICS is attempting to get a currency on board to compete with that. That's how you displace them there. But until they actually do it, they haven't displaced the United States. There's talk about it, but until it's done, effectively done, they haven't replaced the US. And let's say BRICS establishes a currency, they get some people to take it, and then the US says, well, here's what we're going to do. We're donating $5 billion in aid to Trinidad and Tobago. $5 billion US dollars in aid to Trinidad and Tobago, contingent on us not taking any BRICS dollars, exchanging any BRICS dollars. Are we going to take it? And when I say we, I'm talking about our government, because that's who makes the decision. Where the aid money go, it doesn't matter. The money is immaterial. We're talking about power here. Like, it annoys me when people think there's a dean and a principal. This is the over institutionalizing of our generation. They think there's a dean, a principal, a teacher that you could go to, because this isn't fair. So like how the US could do that. How dare they do that? Where the principal, I go and tell some, they are the principal too. There's nobody to tell.
And next thing people don't understand, one, people haven't seen America go into a full war in the last 30 years. What I mean by that, Americans have a way that they unite around each other when it comes to war, especially when they feel their livelihood and their way of life and their freedoms has been threatened. America has one of the most experienced war machines that is
not one of,
operating.
They have the most experienced war machine by far. It's not even close.
And for those who is unaware, what I mean by experienced war machine, I mean that years of experience in terms of combat experience, naval experience. The thing I was listening, was it a Russian general or someone was explaining some of the things that are special about the US military. Logistics. You see, logistics, that's what they have up on most other places. Logistics. They're able to get it done. Their engineers are going to get it done. Now, they cannot come in and recreate your country, because I don't think anybody can. But if they're talking about coming in and conquering your standing military, and for those who are aware that the power that the United States projects is only 15% of what we know. When for example, the tools and equipment, the carriers and all those kind of things are outdated carriers. They have technology that is almost, because they have something what they call think tank, and their job is just to think of all kind of things that will be needed in the next 40, 50 years.
Here's the way I think about this. I've heard this before, and the way to think about this: when the US dropped the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, no one in the world knew they had the capability to do that. That was a shock. No one knew it. So, and Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bomb, is old technology. Real old technology. You're understanding? Think about how much technology advanced since 1930s to now. And then think about the fact that technology advances first in the military, and then it trickles into commercial, regular use. We have no idea the kind of weapons that may be out there, and personally, I kind of don't want to find out. Personally, like, you all keep your weapons on the low. I really don't want to know. Don't use them anywhere, anyhow. John says, so why the US pull out of Afghanistan and Iraq? That's what I was just now, Ronnie. That's the point I was making previously. The solution, the goals they have in mind for victory is why they cannot win. They want to go in and change hearts and minds and do nation building. It doesn't work that way. You don't go in and conquer land and then change everyone into California somehow. It does not happen like that. It's a pipe dream. But if their mission was to go into Afghanistan and clear out all the standing army, they did that within a week. If it was to do that in Iraq, they did that within 2 weeks. The problem wasn't clearing out the standing armies. And that's the point I am making. I'm not saying that the US is able to conquer a whole new land. But they're able to conquer the standing army. And then, I mean, even if your country stays there, it's in a whole disrepair state and violent and all of that. It's not like it's good anyway.
We are talking about
Yeah, Ronnie, what's going on?
I just have one quick thing to say about it. I believe, now this is my opinion, for me, for a conspiracy theorist, if you would like, I change that in my bio. But I honestly think that America is orchestrating all of these wars and these geopolitics things now because they kind of losing footing with their citizens. America is going crazy and they need something to stand by, right? And I think as I believe it was Room said, they would come together, especially when they livelihood is put on the line. I think that that's what they're going for. I really honestly believe they have nothing else to stand by, so you know what? Let us go to war. It's the only thing that will keep us as a country.
You know why I don't believe that? You know why I don't believe that, Ronnie? Because there are lots of Americans who don't want to get involved in any more proxy wars. One. And two, the US has never stopped. It's not like they're now starting, The US has been in constant conflict since the 50s. I don't think they have had even a year without some kind of conflict.
That is correct. That's what I'm saying. But they have kind of, I guess, moved their hand over a little bit. And I think that they can view them as like, being weak. So, we have to show our strength again in the world, and we have to do that somehow. And again, the only thing they can really rally around is if we say, look, our livelihood is on the line, and then other people, especially the very liberated ones who believe that America is a real shithole, they would have to stand with America. They would have to fight because it's like, okay, my behind on the line too, so let me stand with the country that I absolutely hate.
Yeah, Riyadh.
well, Ronnie. Hey guys, have a good night.
All right, Sylvan, enjoy the night, bro.
I just find it's a frightening thing where countries don't recognize international borders. I just find it's a frightening time. Only have a good one. Take care.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Riyadh, what's up, bro?
I just wanted to add something, right? With regards to U.S. military, I guess we have to view it in the context of since World War II. They realized that it was a whole industry, the military industrial complex, a whole industry. And in order to make it relevant and get funding for that industry, that industry lobbies to the government to get contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And they need wars in order to get those contracts.
Correct.
So it's like a cycle. They create proxy wars, they sell weapons to both sides, maybe get involved in themselves. Since Iraq and Afghanistan ended, they needed to find new ways to spend money on weapons. All of a sudden, Ukraine, Russia pops up. Gaza, Israel pops up. That could spread into Hezbollah and everything else. So it's a big socialist program. The military is a big socialist.
It's a make-work program. When you stop, I was going to say that it's a make-work program for Lockheed Martin and Boeing and those guys, Raytheon and those guys. And it's like when the US left Afghanistan, they left the Taliban with the 10th most strong military, basically, off of equipment. And then, shocker, some of that equipment ended up in Hamas' hands for the raid on Israel. Shocker.
It's a future investment. You need people to fight with.
So the US funds the Mujahideen, who becomes the Taliban, who they then have to go in to fight and defeat. They fund the rebels in Syria who are attacking Assad, who then become ISIS or ISIL, who they then have to go in to fight to defeat. The US jumped into the Gulf War, interfering in the business between Saddam and stirred up stuff, but then they recognized that Saddam in fact had weapons of mass destruction, so they had to return to really get that done. Yes, it's make work.
Hamas is funded by Israel.
Yes.
Muslim Brotherhood in Qatar.
Yes.
You know, and then to destabilize the Fatah party. You know, so that's the playbook of the Middle East. They always, it's like this, right? They go in, they insert a dictator through a coup, and then they go and fight the dictator after they give him weapons. You know, that's
you know,
premise.
Sometimes I wonder, like, obviously some people involved are just evil, but I wonder if some of them are just so stupid. Because I think there are people that believe, because you watch what the US does, and I actually believe they have some people who believe that they are able to just change hearts and minds like that. Like somehow they're going, like, we have the intellect to be able to wheel and deal inside of someone else's country to get the exact result that we want. And it seems like without fail, they always are surprised that it blows up in their face. You go and you fuel the Arab Spring uprising. You want a more liberal style of governance inside of those Muslim countries, and then surprising, it creates instability and causes revolution upon revolution upon revolution.
The point is not liberal leaders, you know. The point is the destabilization, because they benefit from the destabilization of the Middle East.
Well,
I think that's the part missing in the analysis of the Middle East, is that who benefits. You always have to ask the question, who benefits? You know, from my perspective, who always benefits? Who benefits from being able to destabilize the Middle East? So, you know, these people who could go there is with is their companies, because they have protection. You know, they could go in and get the oil. They could control oil prices by destabilizing those countries, because they have links with Saudi Arabia and stuff like that.
And I guess if the country is extremely violent with a lot of varying factions, and this is something from reading a bit of Middle East that some people oversimplify in their understandings of this, and this is why the US is even able to do some of their wheeling and dealing there. There are many factions. You might see one country, but inside of Iran, remember, there were Persians inside there were Assyrians inside, etc. There are many different varying factions who have their own varying intentions, and it could lead to an infinite cycle. It may never end.
Yeah, I think the history of the Middle East and America is that they keep on pushing the envelope, and they keep on pushing it, and we got very close to with ISIS taking over that region and then turning into like more of a global conflict. But I feel like they never learned the lesson. But I feel like they have to do it in order to sustain the US economy. You know what
I think some people are worried about in some of those things. Yes, some people are just playing money, the US economy in the now. But I do think some people are playing the geopolitical game. And what they are worried about is, you look at empires of old, and they're worried they do not want an Arab empire to resurface there. Because if you do not destabilize those multiple factions in that region, and they decide to unify as they were once unified, then how does the US get a base in Syria? How does the US get bases in Iraq? How can the US get good access to Saudi oil?
Think about it, right? If the US never got in the Middle East, involved in the Middle East after World War II, how would a stable Middle East look for the rest of the world with all that oil money?
You see, I think the problem with a stable Middle East is the culture of the Middle East isn't the same culture of Europe, where you have that individualism in free democracies, and each country is going to remain separate and have their own selfish. The Middle East, because of the religious homogeneity and some ethnic links, it's much easier to get one massive empire being formed there. Much easier.
But I mean, well, compared to the US is one massive empire.
I'm not denying that, and so is China. So we were having this discussion some other time, and someone was saying, like, China never conquered anyone and China never did. And how do you think China has a massive contiguous piece of landmass? It's conquest. They were an empire, and they were able to cement their empire at that size. And I'm not denying that, but what I'm saying is, I don't think that the empire that the United States is, the empire that China is, would want a competitor in an Arab empire.
Well, yeah, that's the purpose of the destabilization.
Exactly. And that's what I am saying. I don't think the purpose is just money. I think the purpose is competition. Beside just the money, it's competition too.
Yeah, but I mean, I think understanding that the US is doing it for their own self-interest, and then coming to the conclusion that, maybe they're for the best. It's kind of like, thinking like maybe the white man does a better kind of mindset from my perspective. It's like, if it is that they never give anybody else a chance, or they don't allow other areas to grow so we can see what they'll be able to offer the world, then we're only stuck with what the US-centric viewpoint on what is possible and what is successful.
And in my view of what I'm saying, I am not saying that the US is the best. All I am saying is that they indeed are at the top. And because they are at the top, they are doing what people at the top have always done. The Romans did it. They attempted to ensure that any competition to power that was around them was squashed. And that's what the US is doing. And the problem I think we have, and this is something I think I was saying this even like with the Palestine-Israel stuff. A lot of times I think, and we had a bit of discrepancy on this the last time, that people view the world, the modern world, like it's different from the ancient world. I don't really do that. I understand that there are more rules, there are laws that should be followed, and I agree with a lot of those laws and rules. But I understand that the human being, the biological individual, is still the same human being with the same biological urges and tendencies as we had 5,000, 10,000 plus years ago. So
maybe, but like, for instance, we could make arguments as we evolve as human beings, right? We review the past through a lens, and we say, okay, maybe we did things wrong before. And I think as we evolve as human beings, like, for instance, being able to marry a child or something like that, or stuff like that. We look at those things as like, maybe that was abhorrent, maybe we should not have done that, and we stop that practice. Some religious practices, we stop those. Culture evolves, and I think we have to give ourselves a little bit more credit, and to think that we could learn from our mistakes in the past. But they do say history is doomed to be repeat itself, but it's only repeat when people ignore the past, and they don't try to.
I don't think history is as directional as we like to think it is in that case. Like, there were cultures before that didn't marry children. There were cultures who did it before. There were cultures before that were not for slavery. There were cultures before that attempted egalitarianism. There were cultures that did these things before. And there are cultures right now that are worse than cultures that existed before. I don't think it's as directional as we think. I don't think it's a progress thing. I think it's just flux. It changes. It varies. And in that sense, sometimes in the variance of it, we believe that we have evolved, but in the true definition of evolve, we are not an evolving species in that sense. We didn't evolve in the last 10,000 years.
Talking about like a mindset.
I know. Physically, we didn't evolve, but new concepts have been created and discovered, and there have been scientific discoveries, etc., etc., etc. But I think the imperatives of the natural human are basically the same. And what tends to happen very often is when we get this attitude like there's an advancement in morality, we have changed. The Romans had some of that. They got a bit more lackadaisical in the main cities. They got fat, they got complacent. The place is peaceful. We conquered all our enemies. There would always be barbarians at the gate, barbarians who don't believe in your concepts of progressive, changing and evolving human thought. And if your concepts of evolving human thought, as we were talking about earlier, that even though I don't like war, I understand in reality war is necessary. If your concepts of advancing human thought are such that, you know, we have become so pacifist, we don't need to fight each other anymore. Let's even remove the guns. Let's remove the walls. We have no boundaries on our civilization now. Then some group of grunts out there who probably never learned to write, a culture who never learned to write, but they are very violent, are going to come in and massacre everyone because that's human nature and history.
Yeah, we are always, you know, it's, we are the lowest rung of us, you know, but that doesn't change from my perspective anyway. How
Yes.
Yeah, Ronnie?
I'm just saying, you have a request. Okay, that's all.
All right. Yes. Yeah. And you know, Riyadh, this is not to say that my preference is that people have this conquest mentality and they should do that. All I'm saying is I am willing to admit that it is within human nature, and I'm not going to pretend like I didn't know this or that it's changed.
No, it's not I'm disagreeing with that point. I'm not disagreeing with that point at all. I believe that as well. It's just that as people who students of history, as you are, I think it's on us to look at history, view it through that lens, see the mistakes, point out the mistakes,
correct,
and advocate for the future generations to try to do better, even if it is that we fail at that point. You know, we should try.
Yes. In advocacy, I agree 100%. So in advocacy, I do not want, because this started off with the Venezuela-Guyana business, I do not want Venezuela and Guyana to get in any war over Essequibo. I would prefer not. I would prefer if Venezuela were to leave it alone. But they already sent it to a vote on December 3rd. And watching something like this coming, like, and in terms of, as you talk about it as being a student of history, and you're watching something like this just walking towards it. And in my response, someone was saying they didn't like that the Guyanese president said that this could lead to violence. He should not have used the word violence. But I understand why the man said that, because in understanding history, if you attempt to take a piece of land that another country believes is theirs, violence usually precipitates.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've seen that happening all over the world.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, Hotep.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of the course of human history, right? Like, the land has always been the thing people have fought for, because the land is a resource by itself, right? You could build up on it, you could amass wealth from it, you could build populations on it. Like, it's happened everywhere. You understand what I'm saying? People want to expand their holdings, and that will always be a thing that people want to do. So even though, yes, modern times we have borders, right? That doesn't mean that many countries are willing to push the envelope on where they could, gather some more land. You understand what I'm saying? Russia done it, they annexed certain places and they want to expand. So for me, it's like Russia will always want to do another Soviet Union if they can, right? As much as possible, right? The same way how China wants to even bring kingdoms of old. It's just how people kind of view it.
And you know,
in terms of wanting to conquer the land.
you know, I agree. And there are different people have varying techniques, and this is why I kind of have pity for Russia in a sense, you know, because that conflict in Ukraine, it's because Russia was losing in the modern context of how it's done. The United States was winning in them modern imperialistic. It's still imperialistic. They're still attempting to conquer, but they were winning at that level where they could wheel and deal. They could push the weight of NATO. They could push the weight of sanctions. They could push the weight of popular culture. So they could infiltrate a lot of, and this was their technique attempting with since the days of the Soviet Union, push American popular culture into Ukraine. So they get to kind of shift popular support to a more westernized view of things, and Russia was losing that influence battle in Ukraine, so they went back to how influence battles were won since time immemorial. Okay, you have your modern way of winning your influence battle, and you know, we were talking about their Riyadh. The United States has a kind of bias if we stick to the modern fair way of doing things, because they created, I'm using quotes for all of them, created that modern fair way of doing things. If you're waiting, as many people point out about the annoyance with the US media and all of that, if you're only using soft power to do conquest work around the world, the United States is probably the best at exerting soft power. And here's the problem. Russia not taking your soft power. You give me enough soft power till it starts to affect me, well, I'm responding in hard power. So I agree, Trini. It's techniques.
Yeah, it's manufacturing consent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you get people to come along with you, and in order to support your wars and your conquering, and make you feel like you're supporting the right side. And I think we on an app called TikTok, right? Which is a Chinese app.
Yes.
And I feel like this app in particularly with the recent conflict in Palestine, Gaza, Israel has done a lot to penetrate that U.S. propaganda with regards to how people view that conflict. But it is, you agree with either side, you end up in a silo, and you end up getting information back to you that you agree with, which sows dissent, which is what America did in the Middle East, but the Chinese are doing it online using social media.
Yes. And listen, if China, the allegations about China and their one-child policy causing future disaster, if that's not true and the economy is more stable than some of the predictors are saying, I think China's long game might work out to be even better than the US's long game. I think it might. Because one, they recognize money is the key, and they're doing that money influence, just like the US did for a long time. And two, you see this business about TikTok and I think TikTok is a war machine. They created TikTok to war the West. So discontent, and like you sit down on TikTok and watch young people creating a fad out of multiple personality disorders, and every new day is a new gender. Listen, this can't be coincidental.
TikTok is a psyop on Western world.
Definitely.
Look at Chinese TikTok.
Yes.
Completely different.
It's educational.
Educational videos. You know, they see about museums and history and stuff like that. That's what their TikTok is, music, classical music.
Yeah.
You know, and our kids are getting trash. You know, basically. But present TikTok's excluded, of course. You know, but you know, in terms of like, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, to me, China is like the old man in the park playing chess. You know how old men in the park play chess for long periods of time because they have strategy that they're willing to hold out on and willing to execute. I think that's China. China's are picking up on the cues of America's kind of game, and they're willing to play chess with America. China is one of them, and listen, if China could bounce back from the one-child policy fast enough, I think we definitely have a bit of a battle to ensue, right?
Yeah.
I believe in Cold Wars. I believe in Cold Wars to the maximum, right? I don't think no country is willing to really do a maximum real-out warfare, like a world war. I think countries are more interested in playing Cold War games to me. So I believe China and America is willing to do Cold War games. I mean, some of that is kind of going on, but to me, China playing an extreme long game, and they're willing to hold out as long as possible in order to get the power that they want.
Yeah, the
Interesting question. Oh, God.
the thing with China and their long game is because they're not a democracy, and that's kind of the benefit of not being a democracy, you know. They could plan with 30-year plans. They don't have to worry about having to get votes, and the president might change, the leader might. It's the same party. They could plan and execute over a much longer time scale. We don't have that opportunity in democracies, at least not in the same way. It's not the same form of plan that we have. It's a bit different. And you know, the America's soft power that they pushed over the world, it's not even that people are just catching on to the American soft power, because I think people caught on to it since the 80s. They knew what America was doing. They understood what Pepsi and McDonald's and pop music and all of that was doing in their country. They had words for it. Americanized, you have cultural erasure. They had words. People knew what was going on. What I think made it more difficult is I think America they lost the adulation. They lost the culture that everyone wanted. The culture that looked pretty to everyone was that picket fence, family life kind of American dream. Rainbow, here you can do what you want, your child can get their businesses cut off, is not a moral position that everyone can dream to be in or would want to dream to be in. It's a harder sell. So I think part of the problem is the culture that they began exporting wasn't as palatable as it once was. And I think that's why something like Make America Great Again sounds so tempting to a large swath of people, even people outside of America, people who grew up watching 80s movies out of America. They would want that America again. Watch back that 80s nice nostalgia movie with the happy ending and the picket fence and the nice family who all love each other.
Yeah, the question I would ask is if you had a choice, and based on the information that you have, is which or would you prefer to live on?
Yes, I think you need to take down a room. It's snowing on the light.
MindFULL.
I want to repeat the question. Yeah, man.
No, yeah, my question
Life
was...
is nice.
Yeah, the question was, which superpower you would, if you had a choice, which one you think would be better? One for the planet, for the world, and two for our country, and then three just in general, you know, for you. Yeah.
My answer, I will say the United States still, because of the state. Who was the one who came up with this British Prime Minister? Churchill. Democracy is the worst form of governance we came up with other than the rest. So it's like
It's the best of the worst.
Right, it's the best of the worst. It's like there are some things about China and the ability to plan into the future that look very tempting. But the amount of top-down power I generally would almost always lean with a greater level of freedom. So that's why I would go with the US.
So you're saying that government is freedom? That's what you're saying?
I am not saying that. I am saying that at least in what they preach, at least in what they say, their goals are much more freedom oriented. And I think if we are being honest about evaluations, the US society is more free than the Chinese society.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with that. I would just say I would like some infrastructure, like a rapid rail train or something like that. That'd be nice.
No. China's infrastructure, and that's the thing. China has the government in order to get fast infrastructure possible. It's a lot of 14 people within the American context, right? To me, because it's funny when I see on Twitter people talking about, people saw this video of Chinese students in a classroom and how they so uniform, and I'm like, you want your child in that? Do you know what that means? That means the government control your children, tell your children what to do, how to grow up, and embolden and entrap them in that sort of system. To me, China is good for a few things, but not for everything, and definitely not for how they want to control their populace. I would lean further into the Western content, and the Western world is Gabaggio, but if I had to pick between democracy versus dictatorship, I lean further into democracy all the time, every day of the week, because dictatorship is ridiculous.
What if it is not China just stays and controls their area, but their influence is their sphere of influence is the rest of the world, like how the US is, for instance. But we still have our democracy. How you think China leading the world will be for the planet,
You know.
I am very confused about why I have not been able to answer the question, and we on to question number.
Sorry, Ronnie. Ronnie, my apologies.
I'm a woman. Is it because I'm a woman?
Go on now, Ronnie. Go on now. Sorry. Go on now.
I'm a bring Rhea up in here. I wanted to answer and put up with this people saying, China, the children in China, what was your words? Basically having control over the children. But if we look at what happened as of in the recent years, the things that have been happening in the US, right? It's not the government so much controlling the children, but now parents don't really have, in certain situations, the kind of hold and the kind of authority over their own children right now. So that kind of is still somewhat. Of course, I would go with America, obviously. That's the power I would go with, because outside of them, it's between China and Russia. And if we're being honest, neither of the other two would really allow for the free coast that we have in the West.
Now, to answer your second question there, Rhea. If it's the United States of 3 years in the future, I would rather China. If it's the United States of 1990, I would rather the United States. Because the United States of 1990 just wanted to export pop music and their movies and their food and drink and stuff, and cool. I am cool with that. Give me a Coca-Cola and a McDonald's, okay, fine. We'll stop at that. But the kind of cultural supremacy and imperialism that they're really trying to do now with the imposition of different moral views, that is a whole different ball game. And China actually, in their positions, in when they send out loans for their Belt and Road initiatives, they regularly point out specifically that they aren't doing things like that. You can run your culture and your country according to your own norms and beliefs. So in that kind of case, I might rather China like that.
Because I was like looking at the African continent, right? I'm sure you're aware. Like they take a lot of loans from China. We in the Caribbean, we took a lot of loans from China as well. I believe it was during the time when we were building like the World Cup, the Cricket World Cup. Around that time, we were taking a lot of loans from China. 2006, I think. You know, out in stadiums, like I think the one in Guyana got built with Chinese money. We got some in Napa and Sapa and those sort of things with Chinese loans and stuff like that. But so, is that a better relationship to have with a superpower than the one that America has? You know, which is it's a question I'm not sure about yet because we don't know China's full agenda yet. But in terms of looking at it from that perspective, it might be better because it might have, because I think what they're doing, America usually leads first with the military. They point the military in a direction, and then after probably, you know, fuck you up a little bit or destroy a country or something like that, then they'll probably bring money and need it, and then they'll help you out a little bit, you know. But China is a diplomacy first sort of thing, you know. The question I don't have an answer to yet. I'm not sure about it.
This is the thing for me, man. I would, if the empire was to stay over there, you know, and just give us the resources, you know, and all the means of doing things, I would accept that. That's fine with me. But you see, it's funny because how I look at it is this, and to me, yeah, sure, China gives a lot of money to Africa or whatnot, right? But when you see things like in South Africa, right, that the Chinese language is becoming part of the curriculum and becoming part of the nation's official languages. You understand what I'm saying? And then you see China taking over certain ports. I'm like, okay, you see now you're starting to get a little Hitlerish here. You know, when we say stand and salute because we give you all your money. I can't, you know, it's a little iffy with that one. You know what I'm saying? Just give me the money.
Americanish than Hitlerish, you know.
Well, exactly. You understand what I'm saying? Because America does that. America said, listen, we give you money, do what we want.
So, that's part of the thing, as you were saying there, Riyadh, that's part of my wonder. Like, if I'm talking just in a vacuum, as I said, in a vacuum, America of the next 3 years, I would choose China. But that's without knowing China's long-term goal. And as we have said before, China seems to excel at planning over a much longer scale. So you may not even fully understand the long-term goals of why China is giving you what they are giving you until it's too late and your hand is too far inside of the lion's mouth, proverbially. So I don't know if that's the case or if it's just an influence game, because there is benefit to China just increasing their influence, increasing their trade. The rising tide raises all ships, as they say. They increase their trade around the world, and they're just and this is what they say. The Belt and Road Initiative, I believe they had a big ceremony in China recently. What they say the intention is just another Silk Road, as it were. It's just trade. We're looking for trade, and as we all trade, we benefit. If indeed that is what it is, beautiful, perfect even. I suspect it might not be, though. That's my suspicion.
Is that suspicion based on what we saw from America for the last 50, 60 years? Is that we saw what America did, so we have that suspicion of China.
And not only America. It's like, as I regularly say, humans. Like, generally speaking, when countries get into a supremacy position, they attempt empire building. Empire building is what countries do. If they get in the position to have power and influence over larger swaths of land and geographical area, are they not going to do it? I think they will.
Yeah, well, you see now with the expansion of China in the South China Sea, you know, they're creating islands. So which encroaching on Japanese area of influence, and they're trying to take over Taiwan.
But
they may invade Taiwan next year. We never know.
You know who I feel, and this is half joking, half serious. As we closing here, we coming into the close. Who I feel going and take over the world? The Indians, boy. The Indians.
Yeah.
And boy, am I glad I married.
They're nationalistic.
I married an Indian, so I married into the conquest. Listen.
Speaking as the Indian here, I feel like they're a little bit too crazy for me. They're a little bit too nationalistic.
Listen.
Moody kind of a little crazy.
But when you watch not just India, but you watch the Indian diaspora, United Kingdom, the capital city of the United Kingdom, the US presidential election on the Republican side right now currently has 2 Indians running.
Yeah. Rishi Sunak is the Prime Minister
of the UK. I mean. And Vivek and this Nikki Haley in the United States. Nikki Haley is also Indian.
Right now you're seeing this thing of Indian people popping up in positions of power, and I'm seeing a lot of tech companies starting to see a lot of Indians on the boards and CEOs now. I mean, if Indians next up, why could see? The funny thing is that I haven't really seen India really take a kind of move towards an empire building kind of thing. There might be, you never know.
I think what was telling was their position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. They told US it's none of our business. We still buying oil from Russia. So it shows a little bit of independence in thought. They also just went and killed some guy in Canada who they thought was a terrorist.
The Sikh?
So.
Yes. So I think India has enough internal conflict and politics that they don't have to worry about. Don't kill the dog. Don't kill the dog, please.
The dog not get run out there.
Yeah, it has enough internal conflict and politics that they don't have to go outside to look for any more. They don't have to go outside.
They have a lot
When I read some Indian, listen, it's really complicated. It's really complicated, and there's a lot to balance and all of that. So they don't seem to be extremely interested in exerting outside power. And if India would attempt to take over Bangladesh. They would attempt to take over Nepal. They would attempt to take over Pakistan for sure before they have any interest anywhere else in the world. So if I have to vote for one to be the superpower, by all means go ahead, India. You all do your thing.
If it's one that I like Muslims more than Israelis is Indians.
Well, yeah. If it's one country took Israel's side heavily, it's the India, especially under the leadership of it's BJP. His party is something like
the BJP party,
and they are
very nationalist and
a Hindu nationalist party. And if you follow enough Indian history, you know Hindus and Muslims, especially in certain quarters of India, have many years of bad blood. So from the time they see Muslims on a side of a conflict, Muslims on the next side, I don't care. I on the opposite side.
Bangladesh is predominantly Muslim.
Yeah.
Pakistan predominantly Muslim. All of them was one country, right? So they separated and put the Hindus in the middle, and they put the Muslim populations on either side. So
Yep.
divide and conquer by the British activated that conflict.
Yep. They're actually saying now Hindu is not even the name of their religion. Well, they're not saying that. I saw that video where the man was talking about in Hindu because it comes from the Indus Valley. But even that is a bit strange because I think it came from a word from the Persians, Sindhu. Getting into the etymology, oftentimes it gets.
The term we use is Hindu to describe it, so that's what we use.
The thing for me is that the same set of conflicts India have internally is the same set of conflicts that Arab countries kind of have within of themselves, right? But I think Arabia faster do the empire building than India. You see, if the Arabs was to settle their issues in the next 2 years between their religious things, and they settle on having a massive state or a federal kind of going on in the Middle East, I think Arab known for being this conquest people, so they about the empire build like crazy. They would spread Muslim to the corners of the earth if they could.
There's 2 billion Muslims on the planet already, so there's more Muslims on the thing. But if there's anything that would bring Iranians and Saudis together is a massacre of those Palestine. If Israel does not show some restraint there, Iran and the Saudis are going to have a conversation, whether they like it or not, the leadership, because the populations are going to demand it,
Yeah, that's correct. And I agree with what you're saying there, Trini Hotep. I think if you're talking empire building, not the Arabs, an Arab bloc would certainly be more empirish than an Indian bloc, and it has to do with history. They have historical precedent of it. There have been multiple Arab and Muslim empires. There haven't really been Hindu empires of that kind. They're more centrally located, even though I think getting a unification over Arab lands would be much more difficult than getting unification over Indian lands, because, for example, Arabs have much more ethnic diversity. Well, not Arabs. The Muslim bloc, I'm using words interchangeably here, has much more ethnic diversity. If you're going from Pakistan, spreading all the way across Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, the Arabias there, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and then you go into North Africa with the Berbers, and you have Egypt and Morocco and Tunisia and all. It's just a lot of variation. So even if, for example, they were able to put away some political conflicts and attempt to go into the empire side, who is going to lead the empire? Which ethnic group is going to lead the empire? Shia or Sunni is going to lead the empire. So, you would think so, but ideologies don't run like that. And if someone were to for the Arab world to do an empire as it has done historically, unless somehow they secularize, which I think is impossible, and do some secular empire, that's not going to happen. It's very likely going to be Islamic. And if it's a religious style empire, it's not going to be about who has the most money. No. Who has the most money is not the person who is just going to automatically come out on top. The African empire, I think that one will never happen. I don't think there would ever be an African empire like that. A lot of it has to do with geography. Africa is massive, and it's not as easy to traverse the entire of Africa as simply. There are many tribes inside of Africa split up all around. It's not just going to be as simple to conquer a big swath. Some of the largest empires in Africa were just on that western end of Africa, the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, etc. They were just on that western little hook there, and that's because in that western little hook, I don't know how many of you know the African geography. That western little hook, they cannot go any further north because they are hemmed in by the desert. They cannot go too far east because they are hemmed in by the Congolese jungle. So it's only so far you can go.
It's very hard to get African empire. That's Africa is huge, it's humongous, it's ridiculous how big the continent.
Yep.
So it's more feasible to get it's more feasible in Africa to get a federalist kind of
that's feasible
functioning with the states and there being representatives of the different states on the African Union and whatnot. So that's more feasible than an empire. That's crazy. An empire in Africa is madness.
Yeah, the idea of an empire, you see, you have to understand. I guess I think it might be what you mean by empire. That we could talk about that.
Well, it needs conquering in order to have a hegemony of ideology.
And I don't see that happening in Africa. If you're talking about a federated Africa, well, there have been many, at least, dreams of that. I mean, Gaddafi, that was his plan. So if our next man coming up with an idea to federate Africa, I hope he has the requisite bodyguards before he proposes the idea too loudly.
I don't think they can even get this federal Africa. I don't think they can agree to have it. I think it's too much. It will have too much person and be has and too much disagreement and too much who don't like who and because what happens is with different tribes and different countries in Africa, I don't think that they would be able to touch and be the United States of Africa. I think that's a big, huge issue.
The thing is, a federated system like the United States of America has, to me, is actually kind of ideal. For a place like Africa, the idea of a federated system is you still are able to basically have your laws and your unique cultures for your unique area. It's just we have a common interest on the national stage, as it were. So it's feasible. I don't think it's going to happen. If I'm being honest with you, I don't think the entirety of Africa is going to become federated. I think what they may continue doing is, as they already have, you may have associations that come closer of Southern African countries, Eastern African countries, Western African countries, Muslim countries in Africa, because there are countries that are more Muslim, there are countries that might be more Christian, there are tribes that may actually still be more in their ancestral worship. These things make some of that very difficult. Anyway, people, we closing in. It's 11:30. Any closing statements from any one of y'all up here? Anything y'all want to say in closing there?
I would like to say, I don't have that much important things to say tonight. But I would just like to say, we are not taking Guyana's side in this war. We are not taking anybody's side in this war. We'll just be begging you all not to hit our Ikakas and not to hit our Chagaramas, because they might want to pull up in Chagaramas. Don't hit us, please. We do not want to be a part of this. We the people, the government doesn't speak for us. America, no, you understand. This is for you. Anyway, enjoy the night.
The treaty of CARICOM will say we have to go and send soldiers, right? I was just wondering if anybody know.
Guyana is CARICOM. Guyana is CARICOM. I forget about that, Riyadh. The CARICOM treaty is military too?
I believe it has some, because I know they have military partnerships. So I don't know if you're listening.
Well, the regiment officers will earn their salary.
Yeah.
Let's finish that. We'll pass it on. Barbados.
Yeah, boy.
Anyway, it was good, guys. Nice conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Yeah, Hotep, what's up, bro? The cricket still out?
Nah, I inside now. I inside.
Half the Venezuelan army in Trinidad. All I need to stop it,
Crazy. tabs on that Guyana thing, but yeah, man, free Africa is the way. You know what I'm saying? That's just how it goes for me. That's it. Yeah, of course. That's just how it goes for me, man. But yeah,
Hey, I mean freedom, eh?
That's how it goes. Of course. Now, you know, yeah. But this guy, I think, is interesting. CARICOM is quite interesting too. But I mean, the Caribbean kind of tried their hands at a federation as well, by the way. So yeah, you know, we will see how this goes.
We will.
I'm sure Trinidad will get in the middle of it because Trinidad is the star of the show in the Caribbean, and we want to show our power too. So just like America, so you know what I'm saying.
We don't have no military power, eh? Dr. Rowles, sir, I beseech thee. Happy birthday. Bat in thy crease, please.
Yeah.
Find your crease, knock your bat 2 times there, and remain there, sir. Please and thank you. In the crease. Alright, people. I hope all of you are educated, informed, or entertained. This was the Mindful Live Show. We will be here again tomorrow evening starting around 9 p.m. I was supposed to be here 9 p.m. today, but you know it goes sometimes. I was here 9:30. So if you don't see me 9:30, I'll be here. I'm supposed to be here 9 though. So I'll see you. Wait, tomorrow is what? Wednesday? No, tomorrow would be 9:30 actually. Tomorrow would be 9:30, people. I will see you guys tomorrow evening 9:30 for the next Mindful Live Show. Until then, people, hold it down. Stay safe. I am out. Laters.